Back in the days when we used to go to CES every year, we used to also spend a lot of time looking at things that were many years from deployment. Announcements of the latest new technology from companies desperate to create a media buzz so their half-finished or half-baked concept could make it to the prototype stage. And that's if they were anything more than just a manufacturer's desperate greenwash intended to last a news cycle or two, or like some of the stuff we saw from Honda, which fell into the "oh, what a great idea, that would be awesome, but clearly you're not going to do it" category. And I'm picking on Honda here because I still remember some of their awesome concepts, but Honda were far from alone. But this year, jumping to the lead on the CES news cycle was Donut Battery, a battery that's claimed to have vastly superior specs and technology when compared to the current state of the art. A battery that they said was basically production ready and indeed about to go into vehicles. Of course, immediately the news cycle was filled with speculation. This is a scam! This is a hoax! It's all faked! Donut recently released the several rounds of testing that they paid for from an independent laboratory of their technology. And so we can answer some of the questions about it, but it also leaves a bunch unanswered. So today, let's talk about donuts. Okay, let's start with who Donut are, what the original claims were from their CES adjacent announcement, and how they compare to current lithium-ion technologies, and also how they compare to other competitors in the field of solid-state batteries, and what's going on with this online controversy. Then we can talk about which bits of the reports from the well-respected VTT Technical Research Centre of Finland support their claims, which bits they don't touch on, and whether there are any claims that it disproves. Because for all the wailing and gnashing of teeth on the internet regarding this, the reports don't disprove what they've claimed, but nor do they prove a lot of it. Not to spoiler the ending, but basically there's just still a lot of questions to be answered. Donut are a young Finnish company who are most well known for the Donut motor, a hubless motor that's used in the Verge TS series of motorcycles. Verge, for those of you who don't know, are an Estonian motorcycle manufacturer who've been around since 2018, but those first bikes came out in 2022. The TS is equipped with a Donut motor with up to 202 horsepower. That's about 150 kilowatts and nearly 900 pound-feet of torque. That's over 1,000 Newton meters. Even with the prior lithium-ion battery, this thing was reported as having over 200 miles of range, presumably not at the same time as using all those horses. The initial reporting around Donut motor had a similar skeptical feel to that which we've seen around the Donut battery. You know, the kind of thing you might expect if they'd said the motor utilizes a temporal surge powered by the explosion of a microscopic singularity passing through the solar system. The singularity's energy shifts the chronoton particles in the motorcycle into a high state of temporal polarization. However, reviews of the bike when it came out did not suggest that the hubless motor was in fact fictional. YouTuber Mark of Mark Travels even spent a summer with a Verge motorcycle in the UK last year, and his review was glowing. While we've not seen massive production of the much vaunted mainstream use cases outside of motorcycles, we have seen some. For example, Longbow Motors, whose honestly very pretty Roadster appeared at CES this year sporting 4 in-wheel Donut motors. It sadly did not appear on my driveway, more's the pity. Certainly an omission. Although they're most welcome to deliver one now, along with the keys and the registration. I shall assume, just like the promised several $1,000 check due our way from all those tariff payments, and the constant winning, our invite to a long-term loan for a Longbow is stuck in the shockingly underfunded and now ineptly managed US mail. We've also seen the motor in press materials from What EV, not the American one, the British one, a company that's building both a passenger EV skateboard platform and one for lightweight commercial vehicles. Anyhow, at a basic level, Donut was spun off from Verge. Initially, this was reported as to further develop and sell the motor technology, But it's now become apparent they were working on solid-state battery technology, on the QT. And now they've decided to stop being stealth. They've come out and shared some, albeit not much, information about their technology. Anyhow, onto the claims. And just as an important note, I need to remind you that it takes a while to script and film and edit these videos, and we are a small team, and I work just 2 days a week doing this. And Donut, presumably in an attempt to keep the hype train hyping, is drip feeding lab test data to the world. We're now at 3 drip feeds of information as I write. Editing Kate here. Let's make that 4. And I'm not the member of this team with a time-travelling border collie alter ego.
I'm sorry, what?
According to Donut, the Donut battery is lower cost than lithium-ion, is made from abundant materials, contains no lithium, has a safe operating range of -30 Celsius to 100 Celsius. It has a cycle life of 100,000 cycles. And while I think that number should have caught the headlines, there were actually more headline-grabbing claims. A full charge in 5 minutes and 400 watt-hours per kilogram. Now, if you're not really au fait with battery technology, you might not realise how wild some of these claims are. Not wild as in impossible, just wild as in far in advance of where we're at with current lithium-ion technology, and also wild in the sense of far ahead of where much larger and seemingly more well-resourced competitors are in terms of approximating anywhere near the theoretical capabilities of solid-state batteries. So, rather than me just ramble at you, let's give you some comparison numbers. BYD's Blade 2 prismatic lithium iron phosphate battery is reportedly between 190 and 210 watt-hours per kilogram. Tesla's Gen 1 4680 cells, when torn down, were found to have an actual gravimetric energy density of 241 watt-hours per kilogram. If you want a really interesting comparison between the prismatic BYD Blade cells and Tesla's cylindrical 4680 cell, there's a great article linked in the down below to a physical science teardown of them both. As a note, the 4680 cell is a hilarious example of Musk going off on a "I think this will be easy" trip, while engineers presumably try and gently explain that no, it won't, while also keeping their jobs. He eventually admitted that his idea that the Samsung supercapacitor dry electrode technology would be easy to translate to batteries was... what's the word for it? Wrong. Anyhow, the 4680, while it produced improved volumetric energy density, was still pretty sucky on the per kilo front, and has been cited as the reason that the Cybertruck is so, well...
This number is temporarily out of order. We're sorry for any inconvenience.
Anyhow, they've moved on to the Gen 2 4680, which a mere 5 years after it was promised to be pretty much ready to roll, does indeed manage to have a dry electrode process, so hopefully they can put all that muskiness behind them. And they're fairly typical, so if Donut's energy density claims are verified, we'd be looking at batteries with nearly 50 to 100% greater gravimetric energy density than current more traditional lithium-ion batteries. How does that compare to upcoming solid-state batteries? Well, QuantumScape's pilot cells are rated around 300 watt-hours per kilo, and Toyota's solid-state batteries are stated to be somewhere around the 450 to 500 watt-hours per kilo range. Or at least that's what they plan for when they get them into Lexus models in 2027. Promises, promises. Not that I'm suspicious or anything. Why would I be suspicious at all after basically every automaker promised a complete transition to EVs and then cancelled all their EV models the hot second the orange dictator said that they could? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a weirdly suspicious person. Cattle also reportedly are expecting around 500 watt-hours per kilo in 2027, so it seems that Donut's gravimetric energy density isn't out there for solid-state batteries. It's kind of what we might expect. Okay, so the other headline-grabbing claim was the charge time. 5 minutes to charge. Now, to get an idea how fast that is, you need to understand what C-rate is, at least a little bit. We're not going to do a deep dive on that right now, but 1C means that whatever the capacity of the cell is, and sort of theoretically for the pack, if you were charging at whatever rate it required to achieve this, at 1C it would take 1 hour to fill the cell. If it was 2C capable, it would take 30 minutes. At 4C, the cell would take 15 minutes, and so on. The reason I say theoretically when we talk about packs is because when you go sticking a bunch of batteries in a pack, you have interconnections, you have weaker and stronger cells, you have temperature variations that need to be kept in check. There's all sorts of complexities. So while in theory a pile of 1C capable cells should more or less make a 1C capable pack, in reality that doesn't exactly happen. Most modern EVs hang out in the 2 to 3C area. The 4680s in the Model 3 and Y peak at around 3C, despite the fact some hypotheticals have suggested that they should be able to tolerate 6. BYD's Blade 2 is spec'd as having an 8C charge rate, at least at the cell level. Now, to get the charge rate that Donut is talking about, we'd be looking at 11C, which is pretty fierce. It probably also needs you to reroute power from the secondary plasma relays and from the deflector array. That you'll need to do that after you've recalibrated the main deflector. At least you will if you're driving your EV in a nucleogenic cloud. Unless, of course, you happen to have a really hot cup of tea to hand, in which case you're golden. 2 to the power of 276,709. What's that penguin doing here? And falling. It also leads to questions about dissipating heat, but we'll get to that when we talk about the tests. When we come to solid-state technologies, the 5 to 8C charging ability seems pretty much the norm, so in this, Donut's 5 minutes to full, or 11C, is pretty out there. So that's one that we'll look at in the test results. The other claim that's out of left field, by which I don't mean it's been taken from Leftism, the critically acclaimed Left Field album from 1995. No, I was attempting a sort of sports metaphor to honour the success of every sports person at the Olympics. Except the US men's hockey team, who can get stuffed. And a somewhat surprising value is Donut claim a lifespan of over 100,000 charge cycles. Typical modern lithium cells tend to drop below around 90% capacity after 1 to 2,000 cycles, which is the typical measure of life cycle. Tesla's second generation 4680s are meant to achieve around 2,000 cycles. BYD's Blade cells are quote-unquote engineered for extreme longevity at 4,500 cycles. And when it comes to solid state, Toyota's stated that using a high durability cathode material developed with Sumitomo Metal Mining, it's developed a battery with a lifespan of over 2,000 charge cycles and a capacity retention exceeding 90%. QuantumScape's last major announcement regarding its solid-state cells was that its prototypes were hitting 1,000 charge cycles at 95% capacity. At that point. Look, I'm all for longer lasting batteries, although to be clear, as I repeat pretty much every time I talk about batteries, because lies about battery longevity are pieces of misinformation that run around cockroach-like, we're already at batteries that last the life of a typical car. Unlike me, with my 57-year-old car that I used as a daily driver until it was my current age, most people don't keep cars basically forever. But even our decade-old Kia with batteries that might go en fuego, that Kia are like, we think this software will stop that happening, maybe? It still gets its pretty much as new range. So most owners will be free of their immiserating loan payments well before the car has any issues with its battery. But like 100,000 charge cycles? A lot of numbers here are within the general sphere of, yeah, that could be done. But that, I'm not going to say that it's not true. I don't have the evidence to back that up. But that number sounds like exuberant marketing hype and nothing like engineering. I'm just saying. We'll get onto finding out about the tests and their results in a moment, but first, did you know that we're here because of our amazing community of supporters on Patreon, YouTube, Discord, and Ko-fi? Unlike a lot of channels, we don't take big advertorial sponsorship deals, and we only exist because you support us. A link in the down below tells you how to join, plus links down there to our channel on the Fediverse, because in addition to being independent, we also think everyone should have free access to information. Okay, so that's the background to where we're at, with Donut Battery having released battery cell testing data from a respected independent lab. The first thing to know is that the tests that they've released so far have all been pretty limited. This isn't like some broad examination of multiple cells for each test, or even testing a fully assembled pack. Nor were the laboratory tasked with testing the broader array of Donut's claims regarding its cell. Although it appears they've been tasked with individually testing each of the major claims, and that Donut plan on milking the hue cow of releasing the results as long as they can to keep themselves in the news, well, it seems to be working. In the first report, the lab set out to specifically test the initial capacity of the cell and the cell's fast charging performance. First up, the cell was tested either resting on one heatsink or sandwiched between heatsinks in a climate test chamber. That's basically a fancy box that keeps the temperature in the box consistent. Although it's important to note that during the initial charging cycle and the reference cycle, the climate chamber was not actually operating. So in that first test, the cell supplied by Donut had a nominal 26 amp hour capacity, and when measured it had a 26.1 amp hour capacity. And when measured after the first and second fast charging cycles, it had a 26.5 amp hour capacity. Donut's original claim was that the cell charges in 5 minutes to full. That may not be exactly true looking at this graph, but it hits around 80% charged in around 4.5 minutes. And sure, it took almost 8 minutes to actually hit 100% full, but I'm inclined to say in the space between marketing hype and reality, that's close enough to suggest that their charging claims are not just pulled out of a venture capitalist's moist imagination hole. Now, where it does get tricky is that they've made claims about the cell's working range, which is reportedly between -30 and 100 C, alongside claims of much simplified cooling requirements. But charging at 11 C, or indeed at 5 C, pushed the temperature of the battery up by 30 degrees with the double heatsink cooling, and up by around 60 degrees with a single well-attached heatsink. Indeed, VTT had to stop the second 11C test because the test cell hit 90 degrees C, which was the safety limit Donut set for that cell. In that case, the cell was just resting on one heatsink. The repeat of the test was performed with the cell strapped to the heatsink to improve heat transfer. So their marketing speak regarding cooling seems a little more suspect. If I was planning to build an EV using Donut cells and I wanted to use that capability for the 5 minutes-ish charge time, then I'd definitely still be planning on a solid cooling system. Well, by that I mean an actual liquid cooling system. But for all the angsty words and videos posted on the subject, the tests basically unsurprisingly said this cell did what they said it would. Which honestly is what you'd expect. If you're a shiny new battery company and you're going to release test data, it's more or less going to support what you said. Alrighty, so that's fine and dandy, but let's dig into the criticism of this a little bit. There have been tinfoil hat folks posting that Donut could have used a different cell for the fast charging tests and the capacity tests, and I'm going to call bullshit on that. The report specifically states that one single cell was used for all the tests. Could they have yelled, "Oh my god, look, it's an actual working Optimus subprime," and pointed the opposite way and swapped the cell out? I guess, maybe. I doubt VTT had an armed guard stood watching the cell for the whole of the tests. And perhaps they Virginia hauled their way in and slipped a different cell in for the capacity test, or slipped a different cell in for each test. But it seems genuinely unlikely. And it's now apparent that VTT were performing multiple different types of tests on different batteries, which suggests that VTT would probably have been tracking which battery was being used for what. Alright, and in the second test, VTT examined discharge performance at high temperatures. Now, some folks had some suspicion after the first test regarding the safety limit at 90 Celsius. In this test, they initially measured the capacity. Nominally, the cell had a 26 amp hour capacity, and in the reference test, it delivered approximately 25 amp hours. That done, they commenced the high temperature testing. For the first of the high temperature tests, they discharged it at 80 degrees C. That's 176 Fahrenheit. And then, having cooled it and recharged it, the charging was done at 20 degrees centigrade, 68 degrees lack of freedom units. And then the test was repeated a second time at 100 degrees Celsius, or 212 of your Fahrenheits. This would be an iffy test to perform on most lithium-ion chemistries because it's in the region where they would likely to consider going whoosh. And the results, the 80-degree test resulted in the battery actually delivering nearly 111% of its room temperature capacity, and in the 100-degree test it produced 107% of its reference capacity. This is perhaps suggestive of the chemistry working better at high temperatures, which is interesting. However, the 100-degree test, which was conducted with a 2.4 kilo compression weight on the cell, did still result in the cell losing its vacuum, which is either suggestive of the cell off-gassing or of some kind of failure of the cell seals at that temperature. Again, also interesting, but also one cell does not a trend make. Otherwise, though, this test is supportive of the cell not catching fire under this kind of treatment, which is, good. And it's supportive of it continuing to function, at least immediately after the harrowing experience, which is also good. It doesn't demonstrate that it can continue to function for a long period after that, though, although maybe that's a test that's forthcoming. Test 3 was a self-discharge test, and before we dive into the results, there's some debate about what a normal self-discharge rate is for a typical lithium-ion cell. I dug around a bit because a lot of people were citing the battery university number, and then a lot of people were criticizing that as not accurate. And I don't have a good answer either. What is right, what isn't right, I'm not certain about. The best paper I found in my very quick literature search said that a 40 amp hour NMC pouch cell lost about 0.1 millivolts per day, which worked out to around 0.5% over 60 days. This is markedly better than the 1 to 3% the Battery University report. However, there seem to be lots of individual tests of individual chemistries and individual cells, but not a lot of agreement about the overall value. Just some great models to apply if you're testing your own cell. And it might be that there's just too much variability between the slightly different chemistries to give a really good answer. It might not be. Drop us an answer in the down below if you know. The other thing to know is that there's what's called relaxation, which occurs immediately after charging. It's basically a voltage drop after charging stops. This happens very quickly after charging stops, and in this third test, what you saw is that the lab charged the test cell to about 50%. Then they left it idle at ambient temperature for 10 days, performing repeated voltage measurements. And at the end of the test, the cell returned 97.7% of the energy that went in. When you look at the graph, you can see that the cell loses around 100 millivolts in the first hour. That's probably the relaxation I was talking about. And then after that, it loses another 12 millivolts over the rest of the 240 hours. If you calculate the rate of descent of that drop-off, including the relaxation, then you get around 2%. That wouldn't be a great result. But looking at the graph, you can see that it's actually very stable after that initial drop, even more so after about 100 hours, so it's possible that it's actually a much slower rate of self-discharge than the raw numbers in the report suggest. And in the last test that's currently available, a test that's different from the others in that this was not conducted in a controlled environment by an independent lab, it was instead conducted by Donut themselves using a Verge TS test mule equipped with an 18 kilowatt-hour air-cooled Donut solid-state battery pack. They themselves demonstrate the bike charging from 10 to 80% in 12 minutes. That's 10 to about 47% at a sustained 100 kilowatts in about 5 minutes, then around 80 to 60 kilowatts until it hits 70%, before ramping down further to about 25 kilowatts when it hits 80%. While the video shows a graph of charging power versus time, and a graph of state of charge versus time, it doesn't provide temperature monitoring, which I would be really intrigued to see. Okay, so that's the tests they did and what they showed. What didn't they show? None of these tests so far provide any information on things like cycle life. Is this cell anywhere near capable of the 100,000 cycles? No idea. It could only be good for 10. It could be good for 1 million. We have no data because that's not something that VTT have tested and released a report for yet. Does this provide any information on the stated energy density of 400 watt-hours per kilo? No. And also, as a thing to think about, we've also never had any information on the volumetric energy density, which is interesting to note. Various internet sources have pointed out that the 94 watt-hour nominal cells used in these tests appear to be dimensionally in the region of cells that mostly weigh around 300 grams based on traditional chemistries, which they've claimed would put the cell at around 285 to 300 watt-hours per kilo. Now, possibly donut cells are way less physically dense, despite being more energy dense, but that's something that we don't know yet. And because VTT weren't asked to throw the cell on a scale and record its weight and physical dimensions, we have no evidence either way other than folks attempting to judge size off a video clip. Well, I say they weren't asked, but they may have been. We all wait with bated breath for the next report. Also, and I don't want to be disparaging, but it has been noted that some people are really not very good at judging size without a tape measure to hand. So until we get more real actual data, it's very hard to do anything other than essentially guess. Does this test demonstrate anything about resistance to fire or damage? Well, lithium-ion batteries are generally okay-ish up to around 60 degrees Celsius. This battery hit around 100 without going whoosh, which is a useful data point. You can test some lithium cells up around that kind of temperature, but it's not generally a super good idea, so yeah, that's interesting. Does it absolutely say without a shadow of a doubt that this is a solid-state cell, or at least not a lithium-ion one? Nope. Does it say that it's not solid-state? No. Does it say that when it gets punctured by some road debris from a oversized vehicle dropping random chunks of badly adhered plastic body panels, or, broken off chunks of aluminium tow hitch as it punches the air out of its way? No. But it does not support that either. At the end of the day, this is data from a few single cells put through a short series of tests once. Is it technically interesting? Yeah. Is it good, really useful data? Yeah, I'd hedge my bets on that. I think we need much more extensive testing and results before we go getting super excited. Okay, so I said I'd look at some of the controversy around these tests. There have been countless posts, videos, comments, either utterly besotted with the technology, do not claim to have, or utterly disparaging it. There have been hypotheses about how this might work, including someone suggesting it's a super paramagnetic nanocarbon composite using the spin of nanoparticles to store energy instead of requiring the movement of ions through an electrolyte. Maybe it is. That is one way you could avoid the degradation that is the Achilles heel of both lithium and sodium batteries. Maybe the donut cell is a sort of supercapacitor battery hybrid. Maybe it's not. But one thing that did crop up that probably wants a mention because we got asked about it is the video by YouTuber Zeroth, where he compares two charge curves, one from an NMC battery and one from the report released by Donut. Those two curves can indeed be made to line up, but the bottom axis on the first curve is state of charge, and the bottom axis on the donut curve is time. Now, I am not an electrophysicist, Jim. I don't even play one on TV, but in general, it's not considered great practice to use two different measures on one axis to compare data that should be comparable. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just also not saying it's right. Without even screwing with the axis, the number of cartographers in New Mexico correlates really nicely with the number of master's degrees awarded in the US. You can make a bunch of things line up if you don't worry about what each axis is. And look, I don't want to get into a fight with another YouTuber, especially one who has much more of a background in electrochemistry than my nearly 30-year-old biochemistry degree had, even when it was shiny and new. But look, he complains that VTT didn't verify the cell was actually solid state. VTT aren't going to cut up a cell if they're not asked to do it. If Donut Labs wanted someone to chop up the battery, they would have paid for it, and maybe they will. The challenge here is if Donut has the tech it claims, then it'll want to promote the hell out of it. But also, if it's like Tesla's robotaxis, they'll want to carnival barker the hell out of it as well. And telling the difference between a competent carnival barker and a good sales pitch for something that works? That's sometimes difficult. Would I like some more transparency around this from Donut? Yeah. Do I believe they have something interesting? I'm genuinely not sure yet. I'm skeptical that they can meet the claims that they've made, but I'm not saying no for sure. At the moment, I still think we're at wait and see. Thanks for watching to the end. Let us know your thoughts on Donut's solid state claims. Are they on the up and up, or is this just smoke and mirrors? We are 100% independent, and if you'd like to help us stay that way, there's a link in the down below to support us on Patreon from $1.50 a month. So you can join the long list of amazing channel supporters right here. You can also send us money on Ko-fi, buy some swag from our swag store, and you could also, if you are feeling very lovely, hit subscribe. YouTube won't reliably tell you when we've pushed a new video though, so do make sure you also follow us on social media or join our Discord chat room. Thanks for watching, thanks for helping be the positive change in the world, and until next time, keep evolving.